a 15-year-old Shoshone girl, a new mother who had been taken prisoner by a rival nation and won as a wife by a white man in a bet. The younger brother of a war hero who, despite never receiving his commission, would serve as a co-captain of the most famous expedition in American history. The president's private secretary, a 29-year-old veteran whose unique combination of charisma, ambition, and curiosity would ensure the success of a mission fraught with danger and uncertainty. From 1804 to 1806, Sacagawea, William Clark, Meriwether Lewis, and the 30-some men of the Corps of Discovery would explore vast stretches of untamed western lands. Their charge? To report on the geography, soil, and wildlife of the Great Plains, Rocky Mountains, and Pacific Northwest, to bring native nations, many hostile to the US, into an American economic and political empire, and most importantly, to find an all-water route to the Pacific as a means of establishing that empire across the continent. It's the Lewis and Clark expedition on this episode of Bigfoot's Great American History Show. On August 31st, 1803, Meriwether Lewis set out from Pittsburgh in a keelboat, his head brimful after months of study on subjects like celestial navigation, botany, and medicine, all of which would prove indispensable on his upcoming journey into uncharted lands. In mid-October, he reached Clarksville, where he met up with his former captain and first choice as co-commander for the expedition, William Clark. By the time the pair reached St. Louis in December, they had begun recruiting a highly selective party of skilled, athletic men and hired a half-Shawnee, half-French-Canadian man named Drouillard, who, importantly, was multilingual and a renowned hunter-trapper. Earlier that year, the Jefferson administration had purchased St. Louis, along with the entire Louisiana territory. All the same, the Spanish lieutenant governor denied Lewis and Clark permission to proceed up the Missouri until the formal transfer took place. At any rate, it was too late in the season to press on. The party made camp at the Wood River and awaited spring. In May of 1804, some 45 men and Lewis's dog Seaman loaded up the keelboat and 2 pirogues and departed upstream. For the next 2 years, they would receive no further supplies, reinforcements, or communications from the east. The summer of 1804 was filled with wonder for the Corps of Discovery. Buffalo, elk, and deer as far as the eye could see. An island in the Missouri River blanketed with white pelicans. The ever-mysterious coyote, never before seen by Americans. Upon entering the Great Plains, the party encountered a village of tiny critters living in tunnels in the ground. Prairie dogs, of course, and more marvels. A quote-unquote goat that scarcely stayed in place long enough to describe, let alone to hunt. The pronghorn, the second fastest land animal on the planet after the cheetah. And then there was the largest footprint Clark had ever seen, belonging to a grizzly bear, a giant universally feared by the Native Americans. This early part of the expedition was also notable for disciplinary problems. 50 lashes to Collins and Hall for stealing whiskey, 400 to Willard for falling asleep at his post. In early August, the party made its first encounter with Native Americans. To the Otos and Missouris, Lewis gave a mostly patronizing speech declaring President Jefferson to be their new great chief and only friend. A few small gifts were dispersed, but not what the tribes really wanted. Guns were in short supply, and the captains needed what they had. That night, Private Moses Reed deserted. Drouillard successfully retrieved him, whereupon Reed was discharged from the party and made to run the gauntlet 4 times, a punishment amounting to some 500 lashes. 2 days after Reed's return, Charles Floyd, one of the expedition's 3 sergeants, died of what doctors now believe was a ruptured appendix. Notably, his would be the party's only death during the entire expedition. He was buried with honors and replaced as sergeant by Private Patrick Gass. In early autumn, 3 chiefs of the Lakotas, known to Lewis and Clark as the Teton Sioux, came to council. Lewis offered gifts of a medal, a coat, and a hat. Seeing that the chiefs remained unimpressed, the captains invited them onto the keelboat for whiskey. Earlier, the Yankton Sioux had warned the captains about the potentially hostile Lakotas. Now, as the chiefs were canoed back to shore, 3 warriors grabbed the pirogue's bowline, preventing it from departing. A tense moment followed. The keelboat was armed with a swivel cannon and 2 blunderbusses. Lewis prepared the guns for action. Warriors on shore strung their bows. In the end, Chief Black Buffalo took the line and released it. The next day, he invited the party to visit his village. Despite this, the scene repeated itself 3 mornings later. This time, Black Buffalo set a price for a peaceful departure. A little tobacco. Clark replied with blistering words, but the captains reluctantly paid the toll, forced to accept that their mission to befriend the Tetons had failed. In October of 1804, the party arrived at the Mandan villages, the center of trade in the Northern Plains region. There, they shared a pipe with Chief Big White and a chief of the Arikaras. While the Mandans were friendly to the Americans, the peace Lewis proposed between the Mandans and the Arikaras was doomed to failure. After all, achievements in war were necessary to distinguish chiefs. The Mandans, as the Lakotas had done, offered the explorers women to take to bed. The visitors had power, they believed, which could be transferred through intercourse. For their part, the captains abstained. In November, the party constructed Fort Mandan, where they spent the winter. Among their visitors was a French-Canadian who brought with him 2 wives, both Shoshone teens captured by Hidatsas and subsequently won in a bet. Relations with the Shoshones would be indispensable for the Americans once they reached the Rockies. The captains thus quickly hired Toussaint Charbonneau, along with his 15-year-old wife, Sacagawea. In the spring, the keelboat headed back to St. Louis, loaded with specimens for Jefferson. The Corps of Discovery continued westward in lighter watercraft. In the evenings, the captain slept in a buffalo skin teepee with Sacagawea, her husband, and their newborn son. The enlisted men slept under the stars. By July, the expedition had passed the White Cliffs and ascended the Great Falls of the Missouri. With the Rockies looming, acquiring Shoshone horses became of utmost importance. Sacagawea's people, however, were beleaguered by raiders and had made themselves scarce. At Three Forks, Clark returned ill after a futile search. On August 13th, Lewis and 3 men encountered a Shoshone girl and elderly woman at the top of a rise. Seeing the men, the Shoshones hung their heads, as if resigned to death. Instead of death, Lewis gave them gifts and painted their cheeks. The Shoshones guided Lewis to a war party, led by Chief Camoate, a man Sacagawea later tearfully recognized as her brother. And then, massive disappointment. There was no navigable all-water route to the Pacific. If the site of the towering Rockies hadn't already confirmed it, the Shoshones did. There was, however, a tribe living west of the mountains who came east to hunt every year. The pass they used lay to the north, though it crossed difficult terrain and there would be no game in the mountains. Undeterred, the party purchased 29 Shoshone horses and, following a Shoshone guide named Old Toby, proceeded northward. On September 4th, they encountered a band of the Salish people, who sold them more horses at generous prices, including 3 colts, for food. After a short rest on the 10th, the party set out westward. Old Toby lost his way. Horses slipped on the steep, snowy terrain. One rolled 40 yards downhill. The men ate the last of their colts. Desperate and famished, Clark and 6 hunters hurried ahead in search of game. 2 days later, to their immense relief, they made contact with the Nez Perce, who gave them food. The change in diet, from mostly meat to roots and fish, made the men violently sick. Here, the Nez Perce might easily have killed the party and stolen much-needed weapons. According to Nez Perce tradition, a woman named Watkuis convinced them not to hurt the explorers. Years earlier, she had been captured by Blackfeet and sold to white traders, who treated her well. The last stretch of the expedition's outward journey was downstream and included frightful rapids. Upon encountering them, their Shoshone guide, Old Toby, ran off without pay. At the Dalles, the party attempted a Class 5 rapid. Local Chinooks came out to watch the white men die. To their amazement, the white men did not. Finally, on November 7th, an entry in Clark's field journal that will live forever. Ocean in view. Oh, the joy. And just in time. It was rainy and cold and getting colder. Yet with the help of the native Clatsops, the party selected a suitable campsite for the winter. In the winter of 1806, the men hunted elk, collected blubber from a beached whale, and made salt from seawater. For the first time, Sacagawea saw the ocean. In April, sick of the monotonous diet and miserable weather, they set out to return to the Rockies, though the mountains remained impassable due to snow. In mid-June, the party attempted to cross anyway, got lost, and turned back. Not even a week later, they tried again, but with 5 Nez Perce guides. This time, they made the 156 miles to Traveler's Rest in just 6 days. At Traveler's Rest, the captains parted. Clark and the bulk of the Corps traveled south to where they'd left their canoes the year before. At Three Forks, he, Sacagawea, and 10 men proceeded eastward to explore the Yellowstone River, while Sergeant Ordway took the remaining 10 along the Missouri to the Great Falls. Meanwhile, Lewis and 9 others traveled to the falls on horseback. There, 6 stayed to help Ordway transport canoes and supplies down the falls, while Lewis took 3 to explore the Marias River. Lewis hoped to find a tributary of the Missouri, American claimed via the Louisiana Purchase, that extended into the fur-rich lands to the north. Additionally, he hoped to find Blackfeet to entice into an American-led fur trading empire. That his party numbered only 4 men, and that the Blackfeet were feared by both the Shoshones and the Nez Perce was evidently not enough to deter him. In late July, the party made contact with a group of 8 Blackfeet. Lewis shook hands, gave the young Native American men tobacco, and agreed to share camp. The next morning, he awoke to a shout. The Blackfeet were stealing the party's rifles. Lewis drew his pistol, shouted a threat, and recovered his rifle. Reuben Field stabbed a warrior in the heart to reclaim his. Other Blackfeet were driving off the party's horses. Lewis shot one of them in the belly. The wounded man had a musket of his own and returned fire. In the end, Lewis's party took 4 Blackfoot horses, plus 3 of their own, and rode like mad for Sergeant Ordway and the Missouri. On August 11th, Lewis was shot in the buttocks, not by Blackfeet, but by one of his own men, on an elk hunt. Thus, he lay on his stomach as he reunited with Clark the next day. Clark's party had zipped down the Yellowstone in 2 dugout canoes, adding valuable information to their map. Finally, on September 23rd, after 2.5 years away, the Corps of Discovery returned to St. Louis. Crowds lined the banks of the Mississippi to welcome them. The entire country, it turned out, had given up hope of the party's safe return. One rumor had the men laboring as slaves in Spanish mines. The captain's map and journals were a wealth of information on the West. Inexplicably, Lewis never hired an editor to prepare them for publication. In 1809, he committed suicide. 5 years later, Clark published the journals, but due to the failing health of his science editor, they included little on plants or animals. It wasn't until the complete journals were published in 1904 that Lewis and Clark received due credit for their scientific discoveries. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Bigfoot saying so long and save me a seat at your next campfire.